So you're out there ripping your local beach break. Maybe you've done a couple of local contests and you started thinking to yourself, hey, I just might be the next Kelly Slater. So what does it take for a Grom at his local beach break to rise up and become a professional surfer? And how much can you expect to make while doing it? Let's find out. Before we talk about the money professional surfers make, we need to talk about some of the paths one can take to get a professional, i.e. paid enough where all you need to do is surf lifestyle. To do that, we must walk back a little bit in time and look at competitive surfing's roots and where it stands today. The first organized professional surfing league was the International Professional Surfers, which started in 1976, which was the first organization to form a tour of different locations that allowed everyone to compete. The IPS was loosely run and the prize money was small. At this stage of the game, surfers were probably stoked to make any money, and the concept of making a living off pro surfing didn't really exist. In 1983, the Association of Surfing Professionals, or the ASP, was formed. With financial backing from sponsors, the ASP were able to lure surfers away from the IPS, and the ASP developed their own tour, which had 16 stops across the world. The prize money also increased. Tom Carroll was the first professional surfer to earn more than $300K in 1988. Tom had been professionally competing since 1978, so if you break that down, Tom earned $30K per year for 10 years, which would be roughly $70K a year in today's dollars, inflation adjusted. That's not bad, but you have to remember Tom Carroll was one of the top competitive surfers during his prime. He held the world title during 1983 and 1984, and he won the prestigious Pipe Masters 3 times. In 2015, the ASP rebranded to the WSL. This was primarily due to an acquisition from Dirk Ziff at Zosi. Ziff is a billionaire who inherited a ton of money from his father, who owned the Ziff Davis publishing empire. Zosi promptly dumped tons of money into the WSL to improve production quality, and also struck a streaming deal with Facebook, giving them exclusive broadcast rights to their events. Competing on the WSL is the most common way that surfers rise from amateur contests to surfing the world's best breaks and collecting a paycheck while doing it. Competing on the WSL isn't the only way to surf and get paid, but it is the most common. We'll talk more about other ways to get paid to surf later, but what does it take to get on the WSL and have a run at the world title? How much can you expect to earn as a competitor on the world's elite surfing tour? First thing you need to do is join the WSL, and this costs. The WSL changed its format last year to try to lift the economic burden young surfers have to face.
Still learning a lot from competition. I like more like free surf, but
the first step in your pro surfing career is the WQS. Unlike in years past, WQS is assigned by region. If you're a surfer from California, you will initially surf against other North American surfers in the US. While this has definitely made it cheaper to compete, it is definitely not cheap. On top of paying your WSL annual dues, you also need to pay your entry fee for each event. In the WQS, your top results are counted. So to move up to the Challenger Series, you need to compete in at least events, but you probably want to compete in more in case you have a bad result. On top of those fees, you will need to pay travel expenses, hotels, airfare, gas, rental cars, eating out, it all adds up. The good news, however, is hopefully by this point, you've got some sponsors that help cover your costs. Maybe you've got a local shaper that hooks you up with boards, and a shop or other industry-related business that gives you enough money to cover basic costs associated with competing. At this stage of the game, there isn't really any money in pro surfing for most surfers. You're just trying to cover the bills. Prize money is relatively small, under $3,000 for a first place finish, and $0 if you finish past 17th. So let's say you shred your way through your region and you are in the top rank and you are now ready to move into the WSL Challenger Series. The Challenger Series is where you will compete against top surfers from other regions and surf events around the world. The Challenger Series starts in Australia, goes to South Africa before making stops in Europe, the USA, and finishing in Hawaii. Your top 5 out of 8 results are counted, and the top 15 ranked surfers of the Challenger Series will get a slot into the coveted WCT. Just to make it into the Challenger Series shows you have the skills to surf And at this time, you should be able to land some big sponsors. One often overlooked skill in becoming a pro surfer is the ability to become marketable. So what does that mean exactly, being marketable? Well, when a company gives you a contract for $100,000, they're hoping that your face and your image will be able to sell more than $100,000 worth of product. It sounds awful to say, but at the end of the day, these people don't sponsor you just on your surfing alone. So on top of having the skills in the water, your sponsors want you to have a unique personality that will resonate with potential customers. If you are a young prodigy and a company thinks you are going to be the next Kelly Slater, they might try to sign you into a longer contract so they can keep you during your prime years. An example of this would have been when Dane Reynolds signed with Quiksilver for $3.5 million per year for a 6-year term. This was by far, at that time, the largest contract a pro surfer had ever received. This eventually, though, fizzled out, but that is for a whole new video. If you're an older pro, a sponsor may want to sign you for a shorter time frame because they know your best years are probably behind you and you'll only be able to effectively represent that brand for a year or two. Plus, as being older, you might be prone to injury or other commitments related to family that might take you away from the sport. This is where an agent or someone more experienced is helpful. A lot of professional athletes, not just surfers, fall victim to not reading the fine print of a contract and pay for it later. Speaking of contracts often come with conditions of performance. There might be a requirement to post a certain amount of video clips, pictures, attend signings at stores, and finally, if that's not enough, there might even be a ranking requirement, or if you don't finish the year off at a certain spot, they can cut you from the team. The average purse for winning a challenger event is $20,000, quite a bit better than your local regional WQS. This sounds good, but the purse rapidly declines after a 5th place finish. A 5th place will only garner you $3,500. The purse is just peanuts when you compare it to the contract if you're in the top tier at this level. Let's look at the 2021 winner of the Challenger Series.
Griffin Colapinto!
Billabong is his primary sponsor. He is also the highest paid surfer on the roster for $400,000 a year. He picks up another $200K with Monster, $75K with Oakley, and $3K with Creatures and FCS. Griffin is definitely the exception and not the rule. Because of his age, Billabong is probably looking at Griffin like a long-term investment rather than a flash in the pan. This can be a dicey proposition for a company, as history is littered with pro surfers who had amazing potential only to implode shortly after the ink dries.
I can't go back in time and dwell on any choices I ever made, whether it's leaving tour or leaving sponsorship or anything, and have any regret or feel I should have done something else. I just know where I'm at right now and what's ahead of me.
Feel the weight.
Putting $200,000, $300,000, or $500,000 into the bank account of someone who often isn't even old enough to drink and have them travel the world and expect them to perform takes a huge amount of discipline on the side of the surfer. Not only resisting all the temptations that come when you travel, but figuring out things like travel logistics, foreign languages, and cultures can just sometimes be too much for a young person. Pro surfers who sit in the middle of the Challenger Series are barely covering their costs, while the ones who are in the bottom third may actually be paying out of pocket for tour-related expenses, betting they'll place high enough in their contest to offset their out-of-pocket costs. So let's assume you're shredding the Challenger Series and you place in the top 15 while being marketable to major brands and earn a coveted spot in the WCT. You have essentially beaten all odds, showed up at the beaches far and near, conquered all kinds of different conditions, triumphed over all the wild variables that can be thrown your way, and still persevered. You are truly in the top 1% of all surfers of the planet that actually earn a good living off of surfing. You should be celebrating and living the dream. While the income fluctuates wildly, even those at the bottom of the WCT are still making more than $200,000 a year. Don't get carried away though. With more money comes more responsibility. You need to keep yourself in peak physical condition and keep your surfing on point. An injury or failing to perform could find you back on the Challenger Series next year. While a pro surfing career may seem like the ultimate dream job, and it definitely can be, for every Kelly Slater, there are 100 other surfers that you've never heard of. This is Spot, signing off. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like. Smash that like button, destroy that like button, massacre that like button, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Are you the next Kelly Slater?